June 15, 2025. A date that would soon be etched into the memory of a nation, not for a holiday or a tragedy, but for a collective stand. A day when ordinary people decided to make themselves heard. It wasn't just another Sunday. The city, usually quiet and slow to wake, was alive with anticipation and purpose. Streets that would have been empty were now pulsing with energy, as if the very pavement was waiting for something historic to unfold.
Across America, millions flooded the streets, wearing cheap plastic golden crowns, a sea of shimmering defiant gold. The crowns caught the light, turning city blocks into rivers of gold, each crown a small act of rebellion, a symbol of unity and resistance.
This was the No Kings protest, a movement that shook the political landscape. It wasn't just a march, it was a statement, a demand for accountability, and a warning to those in power that the people would not be ruled by fear or by force. The message, America was founded to escape a king, and its people would not bow to one now. The signs were blunt, the chants relentless, echoing the founding ideals of the country.
This wasn't a partisan rally. There were no party banners, no campaign slogans, just American flags and a shared sense of urgency. It was a gut-level reaction from a cross-section of the country. People who might never have marched before found themselves shoulder to shoulder, united by a common fear and a common hope. In Washington, D.C., thousands gathered, their voices echoing between monuments to past leaders. The air was thick with history, as if the spirits of those who had fought for freedom before were watching, urging the crowd on.
I served for the Constitution, not a king. Those words, held high by veterans, cut through the noise, a reminder of the sacrifices made for democracy. Make America a democracy again. The signs were everywhere, a plea and a promise, a call to return to the nation's core values.
The plastic crowns were anti-royalty, each one a rejection of the pageantry and power plays of the Trump administration. They mocked the idea of inherited power, turning satire into solidarity. It was a way of saying, you may act like a monarch, but we the people hold the real power here. The chants grew louder, a chorus of defiance that seemed to shake the very foundations of the city.
The diversity was staggering. Fiscal conservatives beside progressives, libertarians next to socialists, all setting aside differences for a single cause. Grandmothers in lawn chairs next to college students with painted faces. Generations united, their differences dwarfed by the urgency of the moment.
As one organizer put it, this wasn't about left versus right anymore. It was about something deeper, something that cut across every political line. It was about democracy versus dictatorship. The stakes had never felt higher, and the choice had never been clearer.
The protests were peaceful but urgent, shadowed by recent political violence. There was tension in the air, a sense that the peace was fragile, that the line between order and chaos was razor thin.
The gold crowns were a joke, but the reason for wearing them was deadly serious. Laughter mixed with anxiety, as everyone understood the gravity of what was at stake.
The No Kings movement united people who might otherwise disagree, all fearing authoritarian overreach. It was a rare moment of national consensus, born out of shared alarm.
The verdict from the streets was clear. The system was flashing a bright red warning light. The alarms were not just metaphorical, they were real, and they were urgent.
This was a visual referendum on American democracy. The sheer scale of the protests sent a message that could not be ignored, not by leaders, not by the world.
We marched because we had to, because silence felt like surrender. Each step was a declaration that democracy was worth fighting for, that the people would not be silenced.
The crowns caught the sun, but the mood was stormy. Hope and anger mingled in the air, fueling a determination that would not be easily extinguished.
The nation was at a boiling point, its people standing on the edge of something uncertain, but unwilling to back down. And the world was watching, holding its breath, waiting to see if America would live up to its promise. If the people, in all their diversity and defiance, could truly hold the power. Subscribe, like, and share Cosmo Academia. What drove millions to protest? It wasn't just one event, but a rapid-fire assault on democratic norms and the very fabric of American society. Each day seemed to bring a new headline, a new outrage, and a new reason for ordinary people to take to the streets. The sense of urgency was palpable, as if the country itself was being reshaped before our eyes.
The immediate spark was the military crackdown on peaceful protests in Los Angeles. Marines deployed against citizens. The images of armored vehicles rolling down city streets and neighbors facing off with soldiers shocked the conscience of the nation. It was a moment that made many realize that the rules had changed and that no one was immune.
Seeing American troops used this way was a line crossed, a chilling echo of authoritarian regimes. For many, it was the first time they truly feared their own government, and it awakened a sense of responsibility to resist.
The administration invoked the Alien Enemies Act to deport people without due process, even canceling social security numbers, making some legal immigrants disappear from the system. Families were torn apart overnight, and communities lived in fear, unsure who might be next. The sense of injustice was overwhelming.
Reports of alleged gang members sent to El Salvador's Supermax prison, defying court orders, made it feel like a war on due process itself. The legal system, once a safeguard, now seemed weaponized against the vulnerable.
The assault extended to higher education. Colombia forced into federal oversight, threats to Harvard's funding, student visas revoked for protesting the Gaza war. Universities, once bastions of free thought, became battlegrounds for basic rights, and students found themselves at the center of a national crisis.
Dissent was punished. Your future depended on your silence. The message was clear: speak out, and you risk everything you've worked for.
The attack on academic freedom was an attempt to control the narrative and silence future leaders. It was about more than just policy. It was about shaping the next generation's beliefs and values.
Military parades and plans to rename bases after Confederate generals felt like deliberate provocations. These actions sent a message that the past was being rewritten and that the symbols of division were being elevated.
It was a rejection of a modern, inclusive America in favor of an authoritarian vision. The country was being pulled backward, and millions refused to let that happen without a fight.
For millions, the combination of military force, suspended rights, war on education, and strongman pageantry was too much to bear. The protests became a way to reclaim agency, to say that this was not the America they believed in.
That's why we marched. We marched for our rights, for our neighbors, for the future of democracy itself.
At the heart of every chant was one belief: Donald Trump was shredding the Constitution.
Protesters saw a pattern: executive overreach, disregard for judicial orders, attacks on the press and judiciary.
This wasn't about policy. It was about the structure of American governance. When the president uses old laws to deport without hearings, or threatens universities for protests, he's attacking core constitutional rights.
These weren't isolated incidents. They were seen as a project to consolidate power.
The Constitution was supposed to shield us from government overreach. Now people felt exposed.
The No Kings protest was a public intervention, an attempt to grab the national charter back from the shredder.
For many, this was personal, not theoretical. Subscribe, like, and share Cosmo Academia. Veterans were among the most powerful and respected voices in the No Kings protests, lending a unique weight to the movement. Their presence on the front lines sent a message that this was about more than politics. It was about the core values of the nation.
In DC, Army veteran Chris Yazel said it all: America doesn't do military parades. This is authoritarianism, he warned, and it's not what we fought for. Veterans like Chris made it clear that their service was about defending democracy, not celebrating power. Major Jackson, a Vietnam vet, declared, "Trump is destroying what my friends died for. He's shredding our Constitution." His words echoed the pain and frustration felt by many who had sacrificed so much for the country's ideals.
For veterans, the flag and Constitution are sacred symbols, representing the freedoms they swore to protect. The administration's actions felt like a deep betrayal, cutting to the heart of their service and beliefs.
Reverend Pat Ryan, a former Army officer, condemned Trump's push for military parades and the idea of renaming bases after Confederate generals. He called on fellow Americans to remember what true patriotism means. Laura Gustafson, a therapist, said, "We're taking the flag back. Patriotism isn't just for one side." She spoke for many who felt their love of country was being misrepresented.
Veterans showed up in service caps and jackets, reminding the country that defending America sometimes means standing up to its own government. Their courage inspired others to join and speak out. Their presence gave the protests moral authority, bridging generations and uniting people from all walks of life.
This wasn't just politics, it was a defense of the Republic itself. The stakes felt higher than ever, and the veterans' leadership made that clear.
The marches became a fight for the soul of the nation, with veterans standing as guardians of democracy and the American promise. Immigrants and students were vital threads in the No Kings tapestry.
Victor, a chef from Argentina, said, "America is supposed to be the land of opportunity, built on immigrants."
Mass deportations and cancelled social security numbers felt like a betrayal of that promise.
Layla Sanchez, a 17-year-old student, marched to represent her Mexican and American heritage.
For students, threats to revoke visas for protesting were a direct attack on free expression.
They marched for their future, for their right to dissent, and for the idea of America as a sanctuary.
Their presence was a living rebuke to an exclusionary vision of the nation. They marched to defend an America with room for all. The battle for America's soul was fought in universities as much as on the streets.
The Trump administration's campaign against higher education was systematic and alarming.
Forcing Columbia into federal oversight was a warning to all universities.
In Texas, SB 37 allowed anyone to file complaints against professors for ideological teaching, risking jobs and funding.
Indiana's new law made tenure meaningless, exposing professors to political pressure.
The result was fear and self-censorship on campuses.
The message, control your students, police your faculty, or face consequences.
That's why so many in academia joined the protests, to defend the very idea of a university.
Subscribe, like, and share Cosmo Academia. The No Kings protests were steeped in the symbolism of America's birth.
Protesters in plastic crowns invoked the nation's original fight against monarchy. That was a war against tyranny. We are fighting a war against tyranny again.
Protest signs echoed revolutionary slogans, reappropriated for a modern crisis.
The Declaration of Independence listed grievances: obstructing justice, standing armies, economic coercion. Protesters saw modern parallels.
This historical framing transformed dissenters into patriots defending the Republic.
Perry McGowan, an accountant, said, "Democracy doesn't guarantee safety. We must fight for it."
The No Kings movement was a reminder that the American Revolution is an ongoing project. Each generation must be willing to fight for it. The Trump administration dismissed the protests as the work of a radical fringe.
The White House called protesters anarchists and enemies of the state.
Supportive media focused on isolated disruptions to discredit the movement.
The symbolism of the crowns was twisted into a sign of elitism.
On the other side, Democratic leaders hailed the protests as a necessary stand.
They called for hearings and legislative action to curb executive overreach.
Blue states resisted federal authority, refusing to cooperate with immigration crackdowns.
The protests created a political schism. One side saw insurrection, the other patriotic defense. The two Americas were living in different realities. The chants have faded, but the questions raised by the No Kings protests linger. What does it mean when millions believe their government is shredding the Constitution? The protests expose deep divisions over the nature of American democracy. The Trump administration is likely to double down, while protesters prepare for a long struggle in courts and at the ballot box. The movement has altered the meaning of patriotism, reclaiming the flag for a broader vision of America. By wrapping dissent in the legacy of 1776, protesters argued that true patriotism sometimes means opposing the government. Democracy is not inherited. It must be defended by each generation. The millions who marched did so because they believed intervention was necessary. The future of the American experiment now rests on whether the nation will still have no king. Subscribe, like, and share Cosmo Academia.